the dedication of Karen Craig Nolan Park on the 25th. At least the Greenway part.
I'm excited. Long time coming. It's going to be really special.
Yeah, we got more to do for sure, but we thought we'd get what we could get done now, and then we have to wait for MSD to do their glorious work.
Noble.
Noble, that's it.
Everybody needs it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandra Kilgore, and I'm chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. And I'd like to welcome you all to the August 14th, 2023 remote meeting. All council committee members and staff are participating virtually. And to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city's website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those with us today, we'd like to say welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 8187. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. And at this point, speakers who would like to speak, please push the *3 to enter the speaker queue. And at this time, I'd like to do a roll call. I will go through and introduce all our committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Turner will not be able to join us today. She's, I guess, on vacation, but anyway, but we have everyone else here. So Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. We have Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good afternoon.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
I think she's watching via YouTube.
Okay. So we have Assistant City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Urban Design and Place Strategies Manager Stephanie Dahl.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Director of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities Chris Cole.
Hi, everyone.
Community Events Manager John Philman.
He's planning to join. He's just not here yet.
Okay. And also joining us today is Chair of the Asheville Area River Arts Development Commission. And she will be here, Ms. Ann Keller, for the Commission Riverfront Annual Update.
Hi, everyone.
And now, at this time, we will get started with our agenda today. First, I'd like to, John has joined us here. John, would you like to say a quick hello? John?
I apologize. This is John.
Hi, John. Would you like to say a quick hello?
Hello.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'd like to first get the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion?
That's me. I have a motion to approve.
Okay. And I will second that motion. And at this time, Councilwoman Ullman.
Aye.
Okay, myself, Councilwoman Kilgore, aye. Motion passes. And at this time, we'd like to give a number 2 on the agenda today will be the Asheville Riverfront Redevelopment Commission Annual Update, and that will be given by Ann Keller.
Thank you, everyone. The Vice Chair, Kate Nkaya, could not join us because just like Councilwoman Turner, she's on vacation. So it'll just be me. Next. as a quick reminder of everybody who has familiarity with this commission and maybe others who don't know much about it, it was developed to provide recommendations to the city and the county on how to, continue development and maintain sustainability along the riverfront through the region. So it isn't just a city focus, but it has been largely a city focus lately. Next. We have 14 members, and if you look down through the list, you'll see people who represent artists, independent business folks, chamber. We have Joe Balkin, who owns Wrongway Campground there on Amboy Road. We've got Jay Hackett. A lot of different interesting people are there with backgrounds very varied, I guess you'd say, and they give a lot of thought to the things that we're talking about. Next. The commission was actually started in 2009 because there, I guess, was in mind the idea that the River Arts District was going to undergo a lot of development and change. And there were people in the area who felt like they wanted to be heard and have some input on it, a variety of types of people and backgrounds. So the city manager convened those parties and discussed it, and then created this Riverfront Commission, which then the next year was able to get involved in talking about and evaluating the River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project. I think it was maybe then that I first came to know about the Riverfront Commission, because I believe coming up from Atlanta as an EPA employee working on the RAD tip and other things up here, I think we sat in on one of the meetings. So it's kind of interesting to me as I look back on that. And then in 2011, as this whole project down there in the RAD continued to develop with all the different abandoned or underused or, needing work kind of areas, all brownfield project sites were looked at and discussed by the commission. And they also took an active role in the task force that was looking at flood mitigation. So then for the next 9 or 10 years, the commission played a key role in evaluating development projects as they came forward and really looking at the details and helping to establish guidelines, as well as looking at seeking, how to improve transportation connections and options so that we could get people down there without everybody having their own car necessarily. And then in 2022, last year, when I joined, we held the first River Summit in Asheville. It was well attended by about 90 people with a broad array of interests and backgrounds and expertise. And we found a strong support for protecting and improving our river, as well as the economic benefits that go with it. And stormwater was identified as a key challenge that we needed to tackle. Next. So this year, when I became chair, or right before I became chair at the end of last year, we started talking about, the need to maybe look at the ordinance and bylaws. As a past employee of a number of federal and state agencies, I found that we often set up things and never look back, and they just keep going. And sometimes they run out of steam, and maybe they should be changed or updated or abandoned. So it was a natural for me to consider how we should look at this ordinance and these bylaws, and the vice chair agreed, and all the other members in the commission thought it was a good idea too. So we looked at the purpose and actions that had been established in 2013 in light of all the things that have happened in the RAD and the regional riverfront. And in addition to that, some years ago, the Design Review Committee was established between the downtown and RAD area. So a big chunk of what this commission had done originally, which was getting deep into the design review process, was not now being done by our committee. So there were a lot of reasons to look at that. And in addition to the summit I mentioned, which revealed a need to look at not only stormwater, but also to include additional voices and perhaps other communities in the county. So this all went into the thinking process that we've been through over the last 3 or 4 months, maybe 4 or 5, however many. It's been a while. And And so we'll give you some suggestions here, starting on the next slide, please, Katie, for updates that we'd like to see to the ordinance. First of all, the first one right out of the gate was, let's change it to Asheville Buncombe Riverfront Commission. It isn't just about redevelopment, it's about a broader thing, and it's about how we continue to have our river and have it be a benefit to all of us, economically and environmentally and for fun. And naming Buncombe as part of that, I think, is much more inclusive and engaging, and I think people see it differently. We also looked at ways we could use language in the ordinance to promote a better watershed type of lens or perspective on it, so that we're not just looking at one thing at a time or one small area at a time, but looking, say, from all the way from Whitfin to Black Mountain, which you'll see down below. So that, I think, was a good part of our conversation, as well as using more inclusive terminology. And we proposed that the city should appoint a representative of some of the traditionally underserved communities near the river who haven't had much involvement. And that would be an addition. But it goes along with us reducing Riverlinks 2 to 1 representative, and SIBO also going from 2 to 1. So we are using our additional membership slots for other things. And I think it'll be helpful, as well as, like I said, adding Black Mountain. We hope the county will do that in their designated list. We've talked to Commissioner Parker about that quite a bit. And Swananoa, there are issues on the Swananoa River that it's coming into us, and we need to be able to be working together. So it's just a way to better emphasize a regional approach, which I think when you're talking about a river this big and this important it's like you have to do it. You can't look at it a little bit, got to do it regionally. Next. For the next steps for the ordinance, we did get it ratified by the commission last Thursday. We're sharing this with you today, and then we're going to present it to the Boards and Commissions Committee on the 22nd, with the hope that by September 12th, we'll have enough support by City Council to have the ordinance updated and approved. Next. And then we have a few other things we want to talk about. Again, I just keep saying stormwater because it's so critical to our region's health and economics. Just to remind everybody, the river has a value of $3.8 billion a year in this region. So we do need to consider it both economically and environmentally. We have a subcommittee or work group between the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the AARRC, where we're working together with city staff. And now we met recently with the consultants that are looking at the fee study for stormwater and the program improvements that might be a part of that. It was a really helpful meeting. We've met several times, but last time we met with the consultants, and it was, I thought, a positive exchange. We're still continuing to look at a kind of a higher level RAD design review process, not as much detail as in the past. Another subgroup we have is looking to meet with some elected officials and other leaders around the region. So maybe Buncombe, Madison, and Henderson counties to talk to them all about these ideas and needs, and find ways we can work together. And we want to talk with other commissions and committees in the city. There's a lot of overlap, for example, between us and the Urban Forestry Commission and Sustainability Commission. And so developing some exchange of information among those would be beneficial to everybody, I believe. And that's one of the issues, one of the things we have in mind. And then lastly, there's a RAD subcommittee that's looking at transportation improvement and ways that we could use public art to reduce some of the graffiti that we keep seeing just growing and growing down there. So those are other priorities for the next couple of years. Katie, next, please. That was a quick run through, but I hope it gave you the highlights and the most important topics for you to consider. And I appreciate your time and ask if there are any questions that I could answer.
Hi, Ms. Keller, I would like to say, I don't really have any questions, but I do want to thank you for this report. It really helps a lot with giving us an idea of what's really going on down there. And I'm happy to see that you're actually expanding it out so it becomes more inclusive in the community. And also bringing in Swananoa and Black Mountain, because I think that's a big, deal. And also even changing the name to Asheville, Buncombe County. I mean, that sort of says it all. So I greatly appreciate all the work that you've done. And I moved back home in 2012 and I went down. So, it's right before all those changes.
Yeah.
And so I look at where we are now and it's just amazing. You've done it. Everyone's done remarkable work. And I just say, keep it going, keep it going. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, a lot of stuff going on Amboy Road now too. So there's the next place, and Hominy Creek needs some help. We'll have to keep talking about these things. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I had one question on, I should have kept the slides up on this, but don't worry about going back to it. The slide that you're just kind of saying other priorities you're looking towards, and you mentioned kind of development, being involved in development conversations. Have you all elaborated any further on that?
No, I think we'll continue as we have so far in giving input on it. I think what we had at our meeting, we had the presentation by Lucy Crown of the Swananoa area, and we've talked many times about how to get some evaluation done, which I understand is about ready to start maybe on the flood challenges along the Swananoa and all of these things being made worse by climate change, of course, which you're well familiar with. So I think, we hope that we'll be involved in some of those conversations. It's really exciting to have the opportunity to add Black Mountain and Swananoa, because they are really important to us. We just sometimes don't think about it, but Black Mountain staff is very interested in participating. And we've started looking around in Swananoa to see maybe somebody from, I don't know, like Warren Wilson or something might want to be a participant to give us input, because since there's no government slot there. But so I think we're just getting our minds around the next steps, Maggie.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I have some ideas in the Swananoa community that might help. So happy to talk about that.
Sure.
And yeah, just acknowledgement of, a lot of the impetus of this commission had priority with economic development. And I love seeing the ecological and environmental focus too, because they're hand in hand, especially there. And so I just feel like the broadening out is really strategic and needed. And I've been to maybe one meeting in the last year or so and appreciated it, enjoyed it. Hopefully I can come to some more, but thanks for your good work.
Thank you. We appreciate that. I think there's a lot of impetus and interest among the commissioners to broaden and do the things that we're trying to do. So it should be a really interesting, exciting year, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll move on to the third item on our agenda today. It'll be the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium update. That update will be given by Chris Coyle.
Hey, all. Thanks for having me. I guess, Katie, if you could go ahead and pull it up, we can get started. All right. Go ahead. Next slide, I guess. So wanted to kind of start talking about the issues at the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, which we briefly discussed in the July meeting as just part of the Civic Center Commission's annual update, since a lot of this was happening right at the same time that we were already coming for the Civic Center Commission's update. But this group asked that we come back with the answers to a few more questions, try to touch base on most of those. There's a couple that were just too big of questions for me to get all the answers together by today, but we're still working on getting those answers put together. But our key takeaways, first and foremost, we've had a major HVAC equipment failure here in the Thomas Wolfe. We've got some quick fix repairs that are already underway. They actually started today, and they're expected to cost close to $190,000. It's a significant reduction from the previously described scope, which I had brought up before at about $1.5 million. The additional recommended longer term repair costs previously estimated around 1.2 million will be delayed, and we're suggesting investing new funds in planning and design. And we expect to reopen this fall or early winter with a reduced capacity after those quick fix repairs are done to non-ticketed events and with amended booking policies. Next. Oh, so the information that was requested, what the current issues are in a brief timeline, repair status, the event status of all of our events on the calendar, and then a longer term outlook. A brief overview of the previous studies that have been conducted and an update on the budgetary and economic impact loss of the closure. Some areas that I'm not going to be able to touch base on today were a request for a menu style of options for a future of Thomas Wolfe, like what would it cost if we did this or this or this. I just haven't gotten all those numbers back from our design team yet, so I'm a little premature for that. And then potential partnerships strategies to fund an upgrade of the Thomas Wolfe. And really that answer relies on what item from the menu we select, right? So if we're going smaller scale versus bigger scale, it's going to have a different style partnership structure and who's out there and interested in that. Next. So our current challenges in the timeline, we briefly went over this last month, but in May, we had an initial failure of our main HVAC unit at Thomas Wolfe. We continued hosting events. We had a mitigation plan in place as we moved forward. Throughout June, the remaining HVAC units began to show some significant signs of strain. We had a couple that started making really loud noises, some others that started leaking a little bit more, but we continued hosting events with that risk mitigation plan in place. Then July 3rd, we hosted what ended up being a completely sold out concert. It was pretty hot outside and humid. And as a result of all of the effects that relate to HVAC and the strain that was put on the additional units, both of the remaining two units separately failed with different style failures. One was bearings and belt failures, and the other was a coil failure. Coil failures are a little bit more significant. So both of those units went down too, rendering us in a place where as at the end of the day on July 3rd, we didn't have a single HVAC unit in the entire stage or seating area of the Thomas Wolfe that was operable. So we immediately started working on temporarily closing the Wolfe and began rescheduling and canceling the events as it made sense. So part of those current challenges, we've got this main unit, that first one that went down in May is the biggest one. It provides about 55-60% of the heating and cooling capabilities to the theater, and it's right in the middle of the attic. We have a back balcony unit that's about 30% of the heating and cooling. That went out on July 3rd, and then we have a unit on stage, which is about 15% of the heating and cooling that also went out on July 3rd. The big challenge is getting to that unit number one that's in the center of the attic. The attic was built in the 1930s, and so it's not up to any current standards. And all of our local contractors and regional contractors, for that matter, that have done work in the past have all gotten to the point that they are not sending crews up there until we add a catwalk or a fall arrest system or both. And the last time that we had something significant up there happen, we were told, this is the last time, we're not going up there again. So we got to start it on a basic design, but we had not had that upgrades completed by the time that this happened. And so in order to fix number one, which is the biggest unit, we have to install a catwalk and fall arrest system, which is about $500,000 of that $1.2 million number that I gave you earlier. So part of our plan moving forward, which we'll get into here shortly, is going to actually be abandoning that unit in place, the unit number one in the center of the house. Go ahead, next slide, please. So the fiscal impact is going to be fairly significant. We're estimating a loss of about 1.2 million in gross operating revenue this year as compared to last year. So it's a 22% reduction. We don't, however, anticipate a need for additional general fund support. We're booking pretty well in the arena and the events that we're able to keep, as long as the events that we have on the calendar that have not yet been announced actually do get to announce. We should still be in a good financial place, and that we're not pulling additional funds from either the general fund or appropriated fund balance, but it's definitely going to be a hit to the operation. And then we're estimating a reduction of the facility's annual economic impact to Asheville and Buncombe County as a whole at around 20.5 million, which is about a 27% reduction from last fiscal year. The complex as a whole has an economic impact of around $75 million. And this is going through with assuming the same number of events in 2023 would have happened in 2024 and pulling that reduction out. Next slide, please. So our next steps, so we're working on an immediate repair of a portion of the HVAC system. This is that work that I mentioned that was about $190,000. So what we're doing is we're repairing the back balcony unit that we can get to without getting into the attic and the catwalk situation. We're repairing the stage unit, and we can get to two different areas in the attic that we can actually meld the ductwork together. So if you picture 3 units in the sky right in the middle, and there's ductwork that branches off of all of them, we're going to marry all of the ductwork together from unit number 3, marrying it with the one in the middle marrying with the stage, so that these 2 units will provide cooling for the entire space, and we'll abandon unit number 1 in place. What this will do is it'll provide air movement, cooling, and heating throughout the entire room, but it will require us to have a slightly reduced capacity. So once we get that work done, we'll do what's called a testing and balancing. So we'll test and balance the units out so that the ductwork is pushing equal air across the room. And once we get finished with that, we'll know what our true capacity will be, but we're estimating somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 between September and May each year. And we'll be in a reduced capacity down to as low as 500 in the June, July, August timeframe, just because it's so much hotter outside and trying to cool the space when you add in the body heat of individuals in there. So when we reopen, which hopefully will be October, November timeframe, it'll be for that reduced capacity, whatever that number comes out to be, and for non-ticketed events specifically. This being that if something else happens with the system, which a lot of the contractors that we've talked with and the one that's actually doing the work has clearly told us that this is like changing the timing belt on your car that has 200,000 miles. You're doing this great thing, you're fixing this area, but now you have this one nice new part and there's still old parts. So other things could fail. And if and when they do, we might be down again for a week, 2 weeks, a month, depending on what that part is. So the risk related to putting on a ticketed event and having to cancel it last minute versus a non-ticketed event is so much greater that it makes more sense for us to go with non-ticket events moving forward, unless we know that the capacity is going to be 1,000 people max as far as what we want to sell tickets with. So the one exception we want to give out there is the Asheville Symphony Orchestra, since they are local. They're not a promoter out of LA or Nashville, so they'll understand our situation and we can be more flexible with them. So if they do want to come back into the room with ticketed events, we'll allow that to happen. But otherwise, we're going to move forward with non-ticketed events only in that room. We're also moving the fall arrest and catwalk system, but with no plan to construct it currently. As if we're going to abandon unit number 1 in place, we don't need to build a catwalk to get to it. And we'll work on that design. That should take somewhere between 60 and 90 days, I'm told. And we hope by then we'll have a better idea if there's any appetite to renovate the room, or if really we should just be working on this $1.2 million repair of that main unit, build that catwalk, get that unit back operational, and get back to where we were in May before this started. Next slide, please. So our recommendations, we're recommending that we come to council and request $200,000 out of our appropriated fund balance. We have a little over $2 million in that account. It's the rainy day fund for the enterprise account for Harrah's, so that we can use that money to repair the HVAC system without pulling money out of our current capital funds. Those funds are being used for a grant request project that we're working on with the TDA. That grant request is actually due on Wednesday this week, and it would get awarded in October. So we don't want to pull money out of that 1-for-1 match project, so that we can keep doing what we're already planning on doing this next fiscal year. And then we'd like to identify funding sources for investment and planning and design for what the future could be, whether that's a big renovation like we've looked at in the past, or whether it's just the upgrades of seats and fixtures like we've looked at in the past. We've really looked at almost everything that could happen in this room over the years, dating back to 2012, I think, or 2002, excuse me. I think there's been 9 different studies on this room and what could happen to it, what should happen to it, et cetera. So we have a lot of study and data already, and it's really kind of packaging that all up to look at it, because each time it looked at something slightly different. And so helping figure out what we want the Thomas Wolfe to be in the future. And then simultaneously doing some additional public engagement to understand what Asheville wants the future of the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium to be. We have done a lot of stakeholder and public engagement in the past, but that was all pre-COVID. So we've done nothing related to that post-pandemics. And it would be an opportunity to see if the same desires are out there that were pre-pandemic, or if that's shifted or changed while we kind of work towards the next steps and getting that menu together. Next slide, please. So the results of our recommendations, it will help get the venue opened quickly at a reduced capacity, but about 6 months faster than what we initially thought it would be getting opened. So that's a really big bonus, and will help us get some of those community events in the room quicker. We'll be utilizing additional funding to be used towards the design of a future auditorium. So there's some extra funding in our appropriated fund balance that could potentially be used. And it gives us the opportunity for that additional stakeholder and public engagement. Next slide, please. So one of the requests was just to get a brief history on past studies. So like I mentioned, we did some significant public engagement and stakeholder engagement in the past. We've done 9 studies or conceptual renovation designs dating back to 2012. So they've included everything from a district style development, which was a report called the Heary Report, which was a performing arts center, arena, convention space, retail space combo. The most recent in 2020, we released what would be a Broadway house scale renovation. In 2016, we looked at rebuilding the theater in a new location and or just renovating to 2 different scales where it is now. And I think it was 2006, there was a symphonic concert hall scale renovation that was looked into. So we've looked at all different options, taking those numbers just from the old studies and plugging them into an escalation calculator online that's looking at anywhere between 18 and 195 million, depending on scope and scale. We are working, we've re-engaged the design team that worked on the most recent renovations to take a lot of those different projects, parse them out, and create that menu for us and give us windows of expenses for different style projects. And I hope to get that later this week because we do intend to be able to have those figures available at the Asheville Arts Town Hall next Monday. So next slides, please. So that brings us back to those key takeaways that we started with. Major failure, quick fix is coming. It'll get us open here in the next month or 2. Recommend looking for a longer term repair cost and project to be delayed while we decide and whether or not we want to move forward with something bigger or continue as is, and expecting to open shortly with those reduced capacity and non-ticketed events. So with that, I'll move on to questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, so many. Well, I guess just thoughts and questions. Just first, like gratitude to your team, Chris, to be just managing such an emergency situation so well, and to reschedule and to work with partners. That's a huge amount of very, very stressful work because of these failures. So please express our gratitude. And I'm on the Civic Center Commission, so I got to meet and talk with some of your team directly then. And if I'm hearing the recommendation correctly, there's the shortest short term, which is under $200,000 that you're putting into it. There's a little over $1 million that could happen, but you're recommending that we don't throw good money at bad yet while we look at bigger scale renovation options and what the cost of that would be and what the scale. And in your slide deck, you were showing us, we've studied what could be done with Thomas Wolfe a lot. It could be almost anything. And so we need to go back to the drawing board to get numbers before we would put something so significant as $1 million into this. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, because what we would end up doing is putting in about $1.5 million, and that would literally get us back to May. And in May, we were, 1 day away from, 1 month from getting shut down, right? And so I think we would need to rethink it. Like, do we really want to put $1.5 million into what's effectively a Band-Aid? Or at the very minimum, do we want to just put in, like, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say it's $5 million to replace the HVAC, even if we don't want to renovate the whole building, but like at least update the HVAC instead of just basic repair again, because we have sunk a lot of money over the years into basic repairs of the HVAC system.
Yeah.
And our electrical is in a really similar situation. I mean, we're still in fuse boxes in a lot of the spaces in the room. So it's getting close to the time that something needs to happen.
Great. Well, and I'll just say, not a question, but having been following along and connecting with a lot of people on the Civic Center Commission, I think now is the right time to look at that menu of options that you were talking about. So say it's making up a number, $5 million to repair the whole HVAC. Okay. But what would it be to do a major renovation? What's the district scale look like? I think that given that our whole council is committed to pursuing and looking into a bond in 2024, I want to make sure that Thomas Wolfe and the financial capacity it would require to look at a bigger project is being considered at the same time. Whether a bond is the right tool is not the point to me, because there's lots of different places that you fund capital investment and infrastructure investment. But while we're looking at bonding and what we want our budget to be going to, I want to make sure that Thomas Wolfe is at the table, like is on the list as well, so that we can be looking at them all together. So it sounds like we're moving towards that, where there's only so many hours in the day. By today, we didn't have that menu. Do we have a sense of when that kind of menu will be available? And would that be coming back to PED? Would that go to full council? Do we not know the future yet? But just curious if we have any insight.
I don't know if it would go back to PED, full council, or what, but I do know that we'll have a few of those options by next Monday at that town hall. I got an email from them today that have some figures on that I sent over to capital projects that I want them to also vet. Mm-hmm. And so I know ballpark what those numbers are going to look like, but I'll have better final windows of ranges. I mean, what I don't want to do is say, if we do this, it will cost $40 million, because that's not realistic. It hasn't been well vetted enough
if
yet.
It's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be more like, if we do this, it'll cost between $30 and $50 million. And we'll bring menus like that wherever we bring them to. I don't know. Ben may know better if that's a PED or full council thing, but yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excuse me. Good question, Councilman Ullman. I don't know the answer specifically, but I would think at some point we'd want to bring that information back to the full council, and that may be the next step. But of course, we'll talk about your work plan later this meeting, and we can certainly use the PED as a good opportunity for Chris to share information and kind of be a sounding board as we continue to move forward with Thomas Wolfe discussions. Yeah. But I do think we need to get to the full council at some point with an update.
Yeah, I would think that, like, if you need council help with menu creation, PED could help, but it sounds like it's not really policy. It's really numbers and how you cut different options. And I agreed, like, I think we need all council to say, are we curious enough about a couple of these options to put some time into really design, which I am, but we need to talk to the whole team.
Yeah, I think it would be similar to the baseball stadium. I think we at one point had either 3 or 4 different style options that we narrowed down to 2, and then we went forward with the one that made the most financial sense. It could be similar to that.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris, for the update.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And now we'll move on to number 4 on our item list. It's the Peck Square Plaza Visioning Plan. And that will be given by Stephanie Dahl, who's Urban Design and Place Strategies Manager. And this will be, that we will be looking at this for review and also recommendations as to passing it on to the full council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwomen. Yes, I'm here today to talk to you about the review process and also give you some highlights from the plan itself. Next. What you can walk away with today is understanding that we have a draft for the Pack Square Plaza Vision Plan. It's complete. It does outline a future Pack Square that can be more usable and accessible by all. Does that in a couple ways that we'll talk about. And we really listen to community input to develop 10 themes to guide our future work in the area and create 10 design ideas or projects that could advance the community's overall vision. The community reaction to the plan is positive, and we will be asking you to consider looking at this plan in September. Next. Just want to step back for a minute and remind everybody why we're here. And we heard a lot from our community that Pack Square Plaza, while a great place where people love to come together and socialize and take part in events and festivals and acts of civic demonstration, is not really all that it could be. This work was instigated by the Joint City-County Vance Monument Task Force and the eventual decision by the city of Asheville to remove the Vance Monument. But the community stood up and said, the Vance Monument caused harm. It may make us feel unwelcome here, but it is not the only issue with this park. So let's take a look at how to make it more reflective of us and who we are going to be 5, 20, and 50 years from now. Next. So just a year ago, a little over a year ago, Council authorized the contract to develop this vision plan with McAdams Company. We started conversations and internal project planning right away. And it was over 1 year ago. It was almost 2 years ago that Council authorized that, the contracts. But we started internal project planning and met with a lot of different stakeholders and had really critical conversations on the upfront, including people from the block and all of the business and property owners around Pack Square itself. Then we had our external project kickoff in fall of 2023, about a year ago. Worked through a pretty extensive public engagement process and released to the public on July 21st of this year, a draft of the plan. We just recently had some public engagement in person, and we also have an online place for people to provide a lot of public comment. Next. I'm going to quickly go through the purpose of the vision plan, the overall vision, those 10 themes and 10 design ideas I mentioned, and a few other recommendations next. We asked McAdams Company to work with our community and with city and county staff because, as I mentioned, it's through and through a joint project here to address the former Vance Monument area and what should be done with it, to address how equity and inclusion could be advanced in the Pack Square area now and in the future. We asked for some guidance on a future design process for making any capital improvements to Pack Square, and that includes some numbers, budget numbers. We asked them to think about public-private partnerships, understanding that the types of parks that we are looking to support are not the types of parks that most municipalities ever manage on their own. And we asked people for their ideas on how to better connect, both physically and mentally, Pack Square to the blocks. Next. So in lieu of reading this long excerpt from the plan, let me just tell you that the vision for Pack Square really captures this idea that the square, which was called a public square many years ago, has become less of a square for people and more a place where we have two roads running through it that inhibit people coming together and sharing their stories and developing strong cultural connections. There's a recognition that this is the heart of our community, and it not only serves as our front doorsteps, but that the look and feel of this place and the way that it performs is a reflection of our community itself. By taking away some of those spaces for cars, we are able to reshape Pack Square so that it's more place for people. Next. Originally, we had 30 different themes that the community came up with, and we worked with them to narrow this down to 10 main ideas that no matter what we do in the square moving forward, we can use these to guide us. That's for programming, that's for maintenance, and it's also for design ideas as well. So you can see that many of these themes, they point right back to the purposes of and why we embarked on this planning process in the first place. This is a way for us to develop consensus about what needs to be done with a broad, diverse group of people. Next. And these are not the only ways for us to transform Pack Square Plaza into a more welcoming and inclusive place. But these ideas are ideas that we heard consistently from the community as their top ideas. And they include both short-term things that we can do and very long-term ideas. So I mentioned some of this to you before, but some of the shorter term ideas are really just to activate North Pack Square, which is the part of roadway that sits right in front of the Biltmore building, and open it up just like we do now for some of our festivals and special events, but open it up more often and maybe open it up where people can program that space themselves. Really, really long term, we heard things like reimagine the municipal building. At one time, it held a mix of uses. It had market, and it also had fire and safety functions in it. Is there a way for us to reconsider how to make a high quality place for our police and fire departments 20 years from now, and at the same time meet some of the goals of our community, which may be growing and expanding and reknitting together the block in East and Valley Street? Next. Besides those design ideas, we had some other recommendations that came out of the community engagement process. One of them was to basically do an inventory or an audit to document how we are telling stories and histories in our public space, specifically in Pack Square. So there are over 300 markers, memorials, and monuments in our downtown, and a lot of them are right in the square or adjacent to the square. They are not necessarily inclusive. Some of them are redundant, and they don't have some binding ingredient that helps the community understand how they all fit together. Once we do that, we can also confirm whether some of those things might also need to go or move into other places. And I'll give you an example. We have some plaques in this area that are memorials to people who have served in conflicts or in the military. Maybe those are better suited to be in areas around the park where we already have a lot of those plaques and memorials, and people are going to that as a destination to commemorate that act of service. Additionally, people looked at management, maintenance, and operations with a new eye and said that the municipal service district or business improvement district conversation that was happening in the community that had been re-engaged more recently is something that the city and county should really take note of. And specifically, it doesn't say this in here, while some of those conversations were very immediate and discussing mostly just cleanliness and safety, that long-term, there should be a way to talk about how these types of management entities play a role in programming events and activities in Pack Square. So that is very common in other parks around the country and actually around the world. Next. So for the next month or so, we are going to be attending many of our board and commission meetings through a review process. So the Community Advisory Committee is a group of 13 people that represent members of our African American Heritage Commission, the County Parks and Recreation Commission, members of our reparations, community reparations, the Joint Commission, our Downtown Commission, Public Art Board, many people who are used to working in the civic sector. They are coming together under the umbrella of the Downtown Commission. So they will be having a conversation on the 26th, and they're our very first stop for some kind of official position statement on the plan and how it can be used, which is what our goal right now is to make sure the community understands how it can be used. They develop that together. We'll go to planning and zoning. Buncombe County is getting a board briefing. We'll close our public comment period and then come to City Council on September 12th. And what you'll see here, our request for you today is that we're looking at a two-step process where we would present that plan and then give you 2 weeks to then consider adopting the vision plan. Last but definitely not least, just a reminder that all of this is happening right leading up to our grant start date with the Monuments Project from the Mellon Foundation, which is the $3 million grant that is going to allow us to implement some of our next steps. Next. So hopefully that some of these things could be questions that you might have, but they might also be areas that I sufficiently addressed for you. Please let me know. Next. As I mentioned, we are asking for your feedback, and some of these questions that you might have are things I can answer today, or in the future, we get back to you. And then secondarily, we would like for you to make a recommendation to City Council that you consider hearing this presentation and consider adopting the vision plan at a later date. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. And do I have any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, well, would anyone like to make a motion to?
I do have, sorry, it's
Okay.
formulating slowly. Great job, Stephanie. Thanks for bringing us your presentation. My questions are probably not even about the plan itself. I think the plan's great. I think the process was really nicely done. I like the 10 design ideas. And I guess it is a question, right? Like if we're calling them 10 design ideas, it means there's an idea and there's a lot more work to make it come to life, right? So what we adopt here isn't like, now the capital plan, we'll do 1 through 10 tomorrow. That's not this type of planning work, right? So for the parts of this that just have so much good momentum and such good opportunity for our community, how do we at the organization turn vision and design ideas into kind of the work? It sounds like the Mellon grant is the first step, and that several of these design ideas or one of these design ideas will turn into an actual capital project. Is that kind of the first step of implementing? So assume everybody loves it and we adopt it. How do we take a plan off the page into deciding about implementation and then prioritizing capital for stuff like this?
It's a great question. There's a couple of pieces that I'll respond to. The first is that, yes, through the Mellon Foundation grant, what we're able to do is take this narrative concept that the community developed about Pack Square being a more inclusive and welcoming place and turn it into a set of construction drawings. So there's a little bit of a design phase at the very beginning of planning and design still to be done with the community right out of the gate. And then there's design and engineering that would be done that will allow us to understand how much this would cost, how we could phase it over time, things that we could tweak so that they were more financially feasible for our community. So that's the first part of it. And we anticipate being able to complete construction drawings within 2 years of this, of October 2023. So in 2025. Similarly, the Mellon Grant is being used to implement not only construction drawings, but actual construction for the cultural corridor that connects to the block. And so we heard a lot from the community that this is another way of expanding what's offered in Pack Square. And it is has a lot of benefits to doing it in an early stage. So that is something that we'll be doing with the community engagement the first year, and then design and constructions year 2 and 3. When we come and talk to you in September, we will be giving you additional information about some of the potential long-term capital costs for those typical design ideas. And what we're hoping is that future city councils will potentially consider allocating or developing through a funding package with partners the types of resources that need to do exactly what you've asked, Councilwoman, which is to take it from a construction drawing level to something that's on the ground. So in this plan, there's about $8 million worth of work that could happen, which sounds like a very large number. But it for one project, but it is really for 4 or 5 projects that would provide a return to the community that we're talking about. And they do not all have to be implemented.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I think just contextualizing why the planning function is so important and how it fits in. I mean, I think we've given congratulations in the past, but this Mellon Grant that y'all secured is just such a fantastic way to really get this vision moving immediately, and that it's prioritizing connecting to the block and Eagle Market Street, and just really a special heartbeat that needs much more infrastructure support is just really exciting. So I feel really thankful for this work, and not sure if there's other questions but I'd be happy to, I guess, make the recommendation proposed. Let me do that, Sandra.
That should be fun.
So I propose that PED makes a recommendation that council receive a presentation on September 12th and consider adoption of the vision plan September 26th.
Sandra, I'll second. Okay, so we can move this to a vote. Councilman Ulmer
Aye.
and myself. Councilwoman Kilgore. Aye. Motion passes, and that will be voted on to council for the other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda will be the committee work plan discussion, and that will be presented by Ben Woody, our administrative assistant city.
Thank you, Chair Kilgore. And real quickly, I just want to thank both Chris and Stephanie for their work on both those projects. And I appreciate council members recognizing that, and really just the fantastic work they've done for different reasons for both of those presentations they gave today. But with that, we're going to talk about your PED work plan for this fiscal year. And what I want to do, I've got information to share, but I want to stop periodically and maybe get some feedback from both Councilwoman Ullman and Kilgore, because really this is your work plan. So I would love to get some feedback from you about maybe if what we've got right, or if we're missing anything, and just kind of help us start to formulate this. This will be PED's first work plan, and we'll have some next steps at the end, but our plan is to have some conversations today, but then we're going to bring it back to you next month to try to finalize. So we don't have to have it all figured out today. I just want to introduce the idea of a committee work plan. So Katie, if you can go to the next slide. A little bit of background, key takeaways. A work plan really is a tool to help you as a committee better organize your work and what you want to accomplish in this fiscal year. Your work plan, and we'll go over some of these other policy framework that exists, but your work plan is really informed by your 2036 vision framework, your strategic priorities and the recent goal statements you created to accompany those. And finally, the basic scope of work your committee has, like what you were chartered to do as a committee. Your work plan is a combination of items. We'll talk about this on the slide as well. There are ongoing administrative things that you do as a committee. There's policy considerations that come before you that you recommend to full council. And then, of course, one thing that we haven't done a lot of on PED, but I would like to see us explore, is you also have the ability to make specific assignments to the advisory boards that are connected to you. And I'm going to give you a list of those here in a minute. We can talk through that. And then finally, a work plan it's going to help us be strategic as a committee, but it's dynamic. It's a living document, and it will be your guide, but it also may change during the course of the year. And so we all know it's, again, something we want to come back to and always think about. Next slide, please. So just kind of putting it all together, where it starts, you have really three kind of areas that really connect to PED directly. Number one is you have your Vision 2036 framework. That's really the high level goals at the council. This has been in place through several councils. So a lot of these goals are here before both of you were members of council, and we talked about this at your retreat. But what we think connects to PED is transportation and accessibility, a thriving local economy, well-planned and livable community, and quality, affordable housing. We'll get into those in a little more depth in a minute. Another step down in terms of your priorities as a council, you have your FY24 strategic priorities. There's three that we believe connect to PED. One is improve and expand core services, equitable and affordable housing, and neighborhood and climate resilience. And then, of course, below that, you can see the goal statements that council created at your last work session. I'm not going to read those to you, but again, you can kind of see the groundwork for what those priorities intend to accomplish and how that connects to your committee. So I'll just stop for a second at this slide and ask, are there any questions about kind of the priority alignment? Did we miss anything, or does that look right to you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much on target.
Okay.
How about you, Meg? So far?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what the other priorities were. I have a list right here. But that looks like the right ones, but I just
Yeah,
we had there's reparations.
Right.
There is reimagining public safety, and
homeless strategies.
Homeless, that's it.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. This seems like the right overlap for the charge of this committee.
I think so. And that's not to say that you won't connect those other strategies at times. It's just, I think these are kind of the primary connections. Okay. So we will go to the next slide, Katie. And so then this is the scope of work, and we've talked about this before, but this is kind of, what more generally what the PED is kind of tasked with working on, and what kind of the overarching goal of this body is. One is to support City Council's long-range vision and comprehensive planning goals. So that's really that connection to the planning department and CED. Another is providing direction on development policies and processes and transportation standards. So again, I think that's that real connection to our transportation department. One thing that I'm excited about, and we'll talk about this in a minute, trying to work with PED, is your actual name, which is economic development. So that's providing some economic development strategies to try to enhance the health of our economy and improve employability of Asheville residents. I think that's an area that we can really put some energy into as a council committee and staff. And then finally, the idea of kind of regionalism. This last one, I think, connecting with and supporting plans with our adjacent jurisdictions. So again, there may be some space for this committee to talk about what the city does and how it connects to the county or to Woodfin or to Biltmore Forest or even, other perhaps state agencies in some instances. Next slide, please. And then one of the things that we did was through that kind of scope of the committee, we tried to identify some kind of just key topic areas. And so I'm not gonna read all these to you, but I think these are areas that we do a lot of work as a city that connect to the scope of your committee. So again, I'll just pause here for a second and just ask the question, does this look correct to you? Does this feel like what we should be working on in terms of our policy areas as a committee?
Yes. And I know that we had spoke about some other issues earlier in economic and diversity and jobs, that would sort of fall in that category. Because I was a little concerned when I looked at the other, as far as the vision plan and strategies that we're working on, how would we sort of bring that under that umbrella? But it would fall under the economic and diversity.
I agree, Councilwoman Kilgore. I think that connects us to some of the thoughts you've had in the past in that area. And I think, that is within your charge as a committee to work on those kind of issues and topics.
Okay, even if they do not fall among those key initiatives that the council is working on.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have a balance of, there's projects that'll come to you that connect directly with a council strategic priority, and we know those are important. But I think just the charge of your committee, I think necessitates that you work on some of these other areas as well. So I think part of the work plan is trying to balance that workload for the committee.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarity.
Yep.
Yeah, the only other keyword that comes up or what have you is, and it looks like it's in some places, but real estate, city-owned land, our regional entertainment facilities, there's work that we can do towards economic development at large. But then there's actual direct services or programs that we offer. So I think they fit in several of these categories, but thinking of our Thomas Wolfe presentation, I think it bundles up under these. So I don't necessarily think I need to revise the table, but just call out that some of this stuff we're going to have a lot more of direct ownership or leadership over than others.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think I've got a slide that's gonna really demonstrate that in a minute, where that connections exist.
Cool.
So Katie, if you'll go to the next slide. And this is where I think, Councilman Ullman, you start to see some of this. And this is, again, I just want to make sure this looks right to PED. So we tried to think through what are the advisory boards, the council appointed advisory boards that really have a direct connection to the work of PED. So these would be the boards, and you've had some of these over the past few months, but we've been having boards come to you monthly, a different board, to kind of give an update on what they're working on. And I think this represents the council advisory boards that really do have a direct connection to PED. And I think this would be the opportunity where if there was something that PED wanted to assign to a board, if there's something that you wanted to spend more time on, I think you have the opportunity as a council committee to ask an advisory board to do that. So, for example, if there were conversations that needed to occur around Thomas Wolfe, then the Civic Center Commission Board is here on this list, and that may be the appropriate way to kind of put that body to work in support of your committee. And then lastly, there's also kind of community partnership organizations or other entities that we can work with as well. And, we listed two here. One is the Mountain Community Capital Fund, and the other is our local EDC. So again, just to pause for a second, does this look like city council appointed boards and community kind of organizations that connect to the work of PED? Does this list look correct to you? Or any comments on it?
I'm looking at the full list again, just for my context of am I missing? But this strikes the right. This looks like the right people off the first blush, and I'm sure you've thought it through.
Yeah, and there's six council committees, so there's always a lot of other connections that get made too with the other committees. Yeah,
I'm just looking. The community partner organizations, we might want to list the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. I think, or I know Kim and I are the representatives or the liaisons to that. But that looks at bigger transportation planning, how we connect the DOT resources. So that's one that we just might want to have like named as a partner. I don't have anything in particular to like ask them to present on, and I don't think it works where we would assign them stuff. But I think that's one to name.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion and one that we probably should have had on here. But again, I view those as more, maybe once a year or whatever frequency makes sense, we could have somebody from the MPO come and just give an update to this committee.
Yeah, or like heads up, this is what we want you thinking about before you're setting your strategic priorities or what have you.
Correct.
The other one, and this is a committee that could probably come to every single council committee, so I defer to y'all's judgment, but the neighborhood advisor, I guess the NAC would go to.
I think they'll go to equity and engagement because of
maybe
the engagement piece. Yep.
Environment and public safety. I could see them everywhere, but as long as there's like I think equity engagement makes more sense. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of interrelated, and some things just go right to a committee, but a lot of times, it's you kind of could see, issues or topics going to bouncing around a little bit. So, Kate, if you can go to the next slide, we're gonna drill down one level deeper now. One of the things, and this is where I think that you don't have to have this necessarily worked out today, but this is where we want to start thinking about what the workload looks like for FY24 and what you want to learn and accomplish. Right now, we've got updates scheduled out through September, October, and November. But what I tried to do here is just highlight some other future agenda items that probably would come to you. And the first area is just kind of annual or information updates, and those may be things that we could begin to schedule regularly. So I think having those advisory boards on the last slide come to you and just kind of information share is probably a good habit to get into, and we can just kind of build that out in the schedule. The other thing I thought would be interesting, this is where the MPO could be on this list too, is we may want to have the EDC come once a year or whatever that may be, Mountain Community Capital. MPO, I actually thought an update on the business inclusion program would be good, and that would be more from staff, but just so you understand what's being worked on. And then the last thing is we have an organizational work plan, and what we try to do is develop projects that are consistent with council's priorities, and we've highlighted those as meaningful and interdepartmental. So one of the things that we've tried to do is we want to bring those organizational work plan items to this committee, so you're able to have input or weigh into those at periodic steps along the process. So a really great example is the Patton Avenue corridor study. That's on a consent agenda item in August for council to fund that study, but I would like to have in September pretty quickly have the project manager come to PED to give like an initial scope and update on what that Patton Avenue corridor study is going to accomplish. So we'll likely add that to the September meeting and then have them come back periodically and give updates as that project advances. So any thoughts, anything missing from this slide? Or
there's three that come to mind that I'm just like curious about, and it's like, where do they live? And maybe it's here, like we talked about earlier, Thomas Wolfe. I think we definitely need full council conversation on that, but just on the radar that if there's interim guidance necessary, that's a topic I think is really important and tied directly to the goals of what we're working on PED. The other I was wondering about is I'm just not sure where the status is of the College Patton Bike Lane project, and given multimodal is this commission's purview, just kind of curious if that's something that is out of committee phase and onto full council phase or what have you, but that would be one to add on to the work plan. And then the third is in our council priorities, we talked, of course, about, I think our housing goal mentioned looking at the Unified Development Ordinance. But given that the UDO is really like a planning function, I would love to see PED having conversations around like what really would the goals of looking at Chapter 7 be, and that might need to go to multiple committees. But I find that to be probably not a small body of work. And in particular, you've mentioned involving committees and commissions. I could see that once we get some clear on what we want to accomplish by prioritizing updates in Chapter 7, that planning and zoning, PEZ, I would love for them to get into that because they are so hands-on. And Sandra, if I'm remembering correctly, you were on PEZ before you were on council. Like the level of technical knowledge and times where you're in the zoning and go, if only it looked like this, we could get the outcome, what have you. Like I think P&Z would be a really good asset in that. So I just would be curious to know, like, I think there's like a whole project there that needs to be fleshed out. And I think PEZ definitely needs to be at the heart of a lot of it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Councilman Ullman. And that's actually why I added Planning and Zoning Commission as one of the,
Awesome.
Connected. Yeah, because typically they're kind of considered a quasi judicial board, and a lot of their work is transactional. But actually, when I added them, I had the UDO in mind. So I know there's some connectivity with that board and this committee. And yes, we'll get the UDO on there as kind of a future. Need to refine what the scope of that conversation is. But yeah, that definitely directly connects to a council priority goal statement. So good suggestions.
Yeah. And with just the last one on that UDO, I think there's several of these, like the Patton quarter study, for example, we're about to fund that in this current budget. Awesome. Missing middle, almost done. Awesome. Transit master plan, already have money. This UDO conversation, I would want to make sure that we are tackling that sooner in the fiscal year than later, so that by the time we get to the budget phase, if there's budget implications for further study in next fiscal year, that it's not like, oh, we slated that conversation for June and we missed the cycle. So I would love to see us open that conversation sooner than later.
Yeah, and I wonder, that's a great example. I wonder if that's one where the PED could kind of task the Planning and Zoning Commission with maybe doing some preliminary assessment. And that could be things as, what is their opinion on the need for UDO update? And what are the things that they think are the most priority? So maybe that's a good way, a good example of you as the kind of the governing committee tasking your advisory board to go spend some time on that and bring something back to you.
Yeah, I could see, if I were to imagine getting an assignment like that, I think a thing that we as councilwomen will need to do is to take it the next level of like, to what end do we want to update the UDO? Because we could update it so literally all the commas are in the right place. That is not what I'm interested in, right? So we need to get clear and kind of say, hey, P&Z, we're interested in you looking at doing this, giving us some suggestions so that we can pursue more housing or stimulate economic development in these regions or blah, blah, blah. And when we were at the council retreat, we just didn't have enough time to get in that level. So I could see us having kind of what is our intention state discussion at a committee level, and then asking P&Z to kind of take that and give us some input.
And Maggie, that's a great point, because I will say that during my time on planning and zoning, it was always, we need to update, the UDO. So, and by giving them this task, it's like sort of saying, okay, we hear you and we want to see what your suggestions are, which gives them a little bit more, reason to go in that direction. So that is a great observation. I greatly think you can definitely help. Sure.
Great feedback. All right, Katie, I'm gonna go to the next slide. So what this looks like is just wanted to get some basic feedback from PED today to make sure we're kind of on track with this. I think my goal in the month of September is to go connect with some of the advisory boards, maybe some of our community partners, some of the staff, and just to try to build out that work plan a little more. So rather than just have a a list of TBDs, I'll start to put together what this could look like over the coming year, and then we'll bring that back to you, hopefully to finalize that, and we'll kind of commit to making that like our goal and schedule for the remainder of the year. Now, again, understanding that things change and pivot a little bit, but and then if that sounds good to our two councilwomen that are here today, that's what I'll plan to do between now and September 11th, and bring you back a little more refined work plan for your consideration.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay. Next slide, Katie. And again, the key takeaways, and again, we're just trying to connect really your policy goals as a body with the work that we're doing as a staff and advisory boards, and just being more strategic about putting all that together as a city and a community. So that concludes my presentation. If there's any other questions.
I don't have any questions, comments.
Great. Thank you.
Nothing. And I love that we get 2 taps, so that if I come up with some harebrained idea walking my dog, I'm like, but we've talked about this, that like I still get a little chance to not disrupt the apple cart. And since Sage isn't here, she'll want to marinate on it too. But we have a lot of really important work already in the pipeline, and so we also don't want to overburden the pipeline too. We just want to get good work done.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
I have one question that's like maybe related or not. I know that we've been working to hire a planning director. Do we have any timeline updates on that process?
We do. We'll be making an announcement later this week.
Congrats to everybody. That's going to be so good for our community. I love hearing that.
It'll be biggest congrats to me, because I'll no longer be the interim planning director.
That's
so
right.
Yeah.
You've been so great though.
Yes, but we will, of course, council will get a heads up on that, but we'll be making that announcement later this week. We're really excited, ready to share that with the community and move forward that great department. So yeah, good question.
That's awesome.
So thank you. And at this time, we're going to move on to public comment. And Katie, do you have anyone in the queue?
I don't believe so, but let me double check. No, we do not.
Okay. No one has any more comments or questions? We're adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job, everybody. Excited about this work plan.
Exactly.
Good job. Yeah. Bye, everybody.